morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. We've got a lot of newbies in the crowd today, so if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world, and you're catching us in a very exciting day. Now, just generally as an organization, we love featuring stories of conservation. We partner with a bevy of the amazing IUCN members working to save species and habitats around the world. We've done a bevy with Reverse the Red, which I encourage you all to check out. Lots to explore there. But you guys are catching us on a particularly fun day because we are in day 2 of 5 on our epic National Wildlife Week series with the amazing folks of the Canadian Wildlife Federation. Now, we did this with them last year, and it was such a resounding success. We just had to bring it back this year. And I think that John today is our only person who's a repeat person coming back, which is very, very exciting. So I encourage you, check out the amazing Canadian Wildlife Federation website. There's so much to explore there, and you guys are in for a real treat with our topic du jour. Now, before I introduce John, I want to highlight that we do have a Kahoot today. So between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to play along with a little 4-question quiz to test your understanding and have some fun, you can pull up that game pin below, and we'll get to that in about 25 minutes or so. But the reason you're all here is that we are diving in live on grassland migrations, and particularly focusing on one of my favorite animals that many of you will not know, which is the pronghorn. Yesterday, we hung out with Nick Lapointe talking about amazing salmon migrations up the rivers. Today, we're going right into the heart of the continent in grasslands with a very, very special species. So, without further ado, I'm going to zip my lip and turn you over to John. John Pronghorn, in fact, with his super powerful last name. Hello, John. So nice to see you again, man.
I see. How are you?
I am so good. This is such a fun series. We've got like 300 plus kids from all across North America and beyond today. And I know you've got a lot to share with us. So I'm going to ditch the broadcast for a second and let you bring up that presentation and show us.
All right. I'll get right on that. A little bit of technology here before we get going. I'm going to share my screen, the entire screen. I'm going to share the audio because there's some audio going to happen here.
Woohoo.
I'm going to hit share.
While you're doing this too, I'll just say that I know you have some interactive bits. So audience, be at the ready on your computer so that you can answer some of our queries that John's going to ask throughout the broadcast. But you're in. It looks great. It couldn't be better. There's our pronghorn. Take us away.
All right. Okay, everybody. Well, I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you for inviting me into your classrooms. I've got a lot to talk about today. Buckle up. This is going to be the most interesting day of your entire year. Guaranteed. Okay. I want to let you know a secret, though. When Jesse called me a couple months ago and said, John, I want you to talk about grassland migrations, I said, no problem. There's lots of things that migrate on the plains. I'll talk about it all. And then I went down the rabbit hole. So I am only going to talk more or less about these guys. These are the most interesting animal, I think, on the plains. So don't tell Jesse. It's a secret between me and you, but I'm not going to talk about generally grassland migrations, but just these guys. Because I think that they are the weirdest animal on the planet. And so that's why I changed the title of my talk, Pronghorn. How weird can they get? Every time I talk about a weird thing, you're going to see and hear that. It's a little stamp. It says weird. You're going to know right at that moment that something weird is going on with pronghorn. Okay. I want to tell you about them. Now, Jesse mentioned this. You probably haven't heard of them because they're not really, unless you live in, say, Saskatchewan. And I know there's a whole pile of people here from Saskatchewan, so maybe you know about pronghorn. But if you don't live in that area, you might not have seen one. So I'm going to go into some detail here and tell you about how weird these animals can get. Okay. We're going to learn all about their weird stuff. Why they have a weird name, why they're weird looking, why they're weirdly fast, why they eat weird stuff, how brothers and sisters fight in a really weird way, and even how weird their home is. So let's start with something that's not weird, though, just to set the stage, where they live. So this, Jesse, can I have my laser pointer? Yes, I have my laser pointer. Thank you, sir. Okay. Can you see my laser pointer?
We sure can. There it is in Saskatchewan.
Okay, so
Alberta.
When I was a kid about 1 million years ago, every classroom had a map like this in it. This is a map of North America. I don't know if classrooms still have maps. I hope they do. I think they're a great thing. But this is North America. So this is Canada up here, the United States down here, Mexico down here. Now maybe take a second to figure out where you live, maybe. This is where I live. This is me. I live in Jasper, Alberta. Oh, and that reminds me, I got to give a shout out because there are 4 classes from Jasper, Alberta here today. Mrs. Lawson's grade 1 class, Ms. McDonald's grade 3 class, Mrs. Irwin's grade 4 class, and Mr. Auger's grade 3 and 4 class are also here. Take a second, all you Jasper kids, I'm in Jasper too. That's where I live. I'm going to open my window. Give me a big shout so that I can hear you. Hang on.
Woo-hoo. Yeah. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
All right. That was loud. Holy smokes. Okay. Tone it down a bit, guys. Tone it down a bit. And I got a message from your favorite librarian. She expects to hear all about this presentation later in the day if you go to the library. Okay. Back to the topic at hand. So this yellow blob here in the middle of the map is called the Great Plains or the prairies. It is where pronghorn live. This is their traditional home. And so if you live anywhere in this area where it's yellow, you might have had a chance of seeing pronghorn sometime in your life. Okay, but I want to talk about the weirdness about them. Why are they so weird looking? Look at those horns up here. Every time I see a pronghorn on my work, I look at those and I think of this guy. I think they are so funny looking. They look like Loki from the Avengers movies, right? They kind of go up straight out of their forehead like this, almost horizontally out, and then they curve back. Such a weird looking thing. They've got weird coloration. They got these black stripes in their throats. They've got on their neck, they got this sort of funny white stripe too. They're super fast, and we're going to talk about that, but they've actually got pretty short legs for something that runs so fast. So I want to know from look a little bit more into the weird horns that these guys have. Let's explore that a little bit. Now, right now, there's only one species of pronghorn that live on the plains, but about, I don't know, 20 million years ago, when the Great Plains were just getting started, there were up to 18 different species of pronghorn. This is what they look like. There are these weird spiral-horned pronghorn. There were these ones here that had kind of like moose antlers on them. And look at these guys. They're like 2 prongs that are sticking straight up out of their forehead. Even these sort of stripy ones that look a little bit like zebras. There was all kinds of really weird pronghorn on the plains 20 million years ago and since then. But right now, there's only one species of pronghorn on the plain. That is weird. We're going to talk a little bit more about the pronghorn, the horns themselves. So this is the horn. This guy got really close to a camera for us. And this part here is why it's called a pronghorn, because it's got this one beam that sticks up, and it's got a little beam part that sticks out that is called the prong. Now, this might remind you all of something, a deer, right? So this is a white-tailed deer. It also has this weird antler that comes up with all these prongs on it. It kind of looks like that. So why is the pronghorn then so weird? Well, the funny thing is that there's a big difference between this deer, what it has on its head, and this pronghorn, what it has on its head. The deer has antlers. Antlers are made entirely of bone. There's nothing but bone here. This whole thing is bone. It will every year fall off, and this male deer will regrow that antler, that new bone, every year. Pronghorn don't do it quite that way. In fact, pronghorn are not deer. They're their own thing. They're closely related to other stuff. We're going to get to that. But pronghorn, because they have horns, are not deer, because deer have antlers. Not deer. Okay. What the pronghorn horn is actually like, it's actually a lot like your finger. I'm going to focus on the fingernail part of the finger. So if you look at your fingernail, I want everybody to have a look at their finger, squeeze their nail. Your nail is hard. It's got a little soft bit underneath it, and then below that is bone, right? Well, this black stuff here on this pronghorn's horn is just the same as your fingernails, made of the exact same thing. And under that is a really thin layer of fleshy stuff, and under that is bone. And that's what makes it not an antler. But you know what's funny? And you know what makes it, oh, I wanted to zoom in on the fingernail, forgot to do that. And so you can see fingernail here, fleshy bit below it, and then the bone underneath it. But actually, what's weird about the pronghorn horn is that it looks like a finger, but it isn't. You know why? Because every year, the fingernail part, the outside part of a pronghorn's horn will fall off. Can you imagine if every year all of your fingernails and your toenails fell off? That would be weird. It would be gross too, but it's definitely weird. So every year a pronghorn loses its fingernail part of its pronghorn of its horn. The bone on the inside grows, and then the fingernail grows back. Weird stuff. Okay. They even have weird names. Now, again, when I was a kid and I was learning about pronghorn like you guys are today, we actually called them pronghorn antelope, but we don't use that anymore. And I can tell you why. Now, I spent some time studying in Africa. In fact, when you looked at the countdown that Jesse provided this morning or earlier in the program, he showed you these picture of all these animals jumping into the river. Well, those were these guys. These are called wildebeest, or sometimes they're called gnus, and they are antelope. They live in Africa. I've been there. I've seen these guys lots. They are antelope. Pronghorn are not antelope. They kind of look a little bit alike. They have horns. Wildebeest have horns. They've got legs. Pronghorn have legs. They got a funny nose. Pronghorn have a bit of a funny nose. Big, big, long tail. Okay, pronghorn don't have much of a tail. These are antelope. These guys are not. And we know that because of their genes, because we've studied them a long time. We figured, oh, guess what? They're actually more closely related to giraffes than to other antelope. Now that, my friends, is weird. And in fact, we treat them a little bit like Beyonce. They only have one name now. They don't have a last name. So they've got lots of talent, but they are only one name. So we're just going to call them pronghorn. Okay. And another thing about their name, I have a friend here in the prairies. His name is Kyle. He is a really funny guy. He studies birds, and he's got a nickname for absolutely everything on the plains. And do you know what he calls pronghorn? Speed goats. That's what he calls them, speed goats, because they are freakishly fast, and they're kind of like goats. Again, they're not like goats. They're not goats, but they like goats, but they are really, really fast, which is weird. Why is that weird? Because we know that deer and elk and pronghorn can be super fast. Why is that fast? Well, or why is that weird? It's weird because they are way faster than any other animal that lives on the Great Plains of North America. And normally, when you get fast animals, they tend to be either a little bit faster than the things that they're eating, or a little bit faster than the things that are eating them. They don't get to be weirdly like crazy fast. Pronghorn can run almost 100 kilometers an hour, or close to 60 miles per hour. They are, and there's nothing else in the Great Plains. There's no coyotes that live there now, no bears, wolves that can run that fast. Not even cougars that used to live on the plains can run that fast. And it's pretty odd that they would run so much faster than anything else that could possibly chase them. Why could that be? Look at those fluffy butts. Isn't that kind of cool? I love when you see pronghorn on the plains and they let the hair go stiff on their rear ends, and then they run away from you, showing these big fluffy bums. Very, very cool. Well, the reason why they're so freakishly fast is because of this guy. So millions of years ago, and you may not know this, I just learned this recently myself, pronghorn used to live with cheetahs. Cheetahs lived in North America. They lived in Canada, United States, in Mexico, on the Great Plains. And we all know cheetahs are the fastest land mammal, right? They can run over 100 kilometers an hour, over 60 kilometers an hour at a short sprint. Pronghorn are actually adapted to escaping from cheetahs. That's such a cool thing, but the problem is there aren't cheetahs anymore. They've disappeared from the Great Plains of North America a long time ago. Pronghorn are still here, but pronghorn can still run fast. Weird facts, eh? Okay. The other thing, the last thing I want to talk about how funny looking they are is this, their eyes. Now look at these eyes. Look at your eyes. Can you look at your eyes? Look at your neighbor's eyes. Your neighbor's eyes, they'll be in the front of the head and they're kind of sunk into the head. Now look at the pronghorn's eyes. way off to the side, and they kind of bulge out a little bit like a frog's eye. See how the frog's eyes are all bulged out? Their eyes are super, super special. They can look forwards and backwards at the same time because of their eyes. They can look if you look at a whole circle, they can look what's called 320 degrees. So almost the entire full circle around them, they can see when they're looking forward. It's kind of freaky. So even when they're running away from you, like this pronghorn is doing for me right now, it can see you looking behind, because you can see, look at this eye here. It's pointed out, pointed slightly back, running forward. I can see you. Weird. Okay. Actually, it's not all that weird. A lot of animals can do that. Sheep are able to do that. Some deer can do that too. I think it's weird. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about their where they live and what they eat. So I said earlier that they pronghorn live on the grasslands of North America. This is what we see grasslands looking like, right? A couple of pronghorn. This is out in southern Saskatchewan near a place called Mankota. I don't know if there's anybody from Mankota in the room today, but this is where that is. And you see lots of grass, a few little dandelions growing in the foreground, but you would think that pronghorn would like to eat grass, like cows do. But in fact, they do not eat a lot of grass. So even their food is weird. This is the stuff that they like to eat. Now, it looks actually pretty tasty. I can imagine getting down on my hands and knees and nibbling on this. Not real. This is a sagebrush. It is the favorite food of pronghorn. It grows a lot on the prairies. There's many different species of sagebrush on the prairies. And in fact, you may have tasted it yourself, because it is the main ingredient in stuffing for turkey. So if you've had turkey for Thanksgiving, then you will have tasted sagebrush. Now, what's weird about that? Well, sagebrush is good for stuffing because it has a very, very strong flavor. And those flavors are actually slightly poisonous. Now, you're not going to get poisoned by your mom or your dad putting stuffing into turkey. Don't worry. Don't go home after this presentation and say, Mom, don't put any more sage in the turkey stuffing. It's not that toxic, not that poisonous, but it's a little bit poisonous, and it gives it its strange flavor. Pronghorn love that flavor, but nobody else does. Even the bison or buffalo that live on the Great Plains do not like to eat sage. In fact, there's very, very few animals that do. And this gives the pronghorn an advantage. The bison say you can eat as much of this as you want. And so it means that pronghorn don't have to compete with other animals for food. When you have turkey dinner and everybody's sort of competing for the potatoes, they all want the potatoes, they all want the stuffing, they all want the turkey, they all want the cranberry sauce. Well, pronghorn don't have to do that, because there's almost nothing else out there that wants to eat sagebrush. They love it. They gobble it up like it's candy. Okay. Now, this is going to be perhaps the weirdest thing that I'm going to talk about today. Buckle up. Okay. Who here has a brother or a sister? I can't see you right now, but put up your hand if you got a brother or a sister.
Put up your hand. Oh, a lot of hands, but not me. I'm an only child. Very spoiled.
You're an only child?
Yeah.
Oh, you can't relate. You can't relate. I had 3 brothers. We fought like cats and dogs. Well, maybe I should say we fought like pronghorn. It was nasty. Well, I don't know how my mom and dad put up with it. We fought all the time. Now, this is a pronghorn mom with her 2 newborn babies. I don't know if they're boys or girls. I can't tell. Look at those fluffy bums. Aren't they amazing? They actually, now that they're born, they like each other a lot. And they tend to fight a little bit, but pronghorn actually fight before they're born. This is a picture that was made for me by a friend of mine, Wenfai, who is really, really good at drawing things, drawing biological stuff. And she did this picture. She let me use this picture. And this is a picture here of a pronghorn baby before it is born. It's called an embryo. That's the word that scientists give it. And when pronghorn are still in the mom's womb, They're called an embryo, and there's usually a couple of them. Now I'm going to call this embryo Fred. And then its other twin we're going to call her Mary. I suspect there's some twins in the house today, so you'll know what that's like. You're born at the same time. You grow up when you're in your mom's womb at the same time. Well, what Mary's going to do with Fred is they're going to start fighting even before they're born. So she's got this little finger on the end of her not even developed body yet, and she's going to move towards Fred, and she's going to give him a poke, even when they're still in the mom's womb. They are fighting like crazy when they're in the mom's womb. When they get born, not so much anymore. Pretty cool, eh? Pretty weird. Okay. Oh, move on slides. There we go. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about today is about where they live. Now, I mentioned this before. They live on the grasslands. The grasslands is an enormous place. They actually have to spend a lot of time moving around just to find each other. Look at this one pronghorn here. He found another group to be with. He's pretty excited. Okay, I showed you this map before. This is where I live, here in Jasper. Hi, everybody in Jasper. This is the Great Plains. This is where the pronghorn live. It's a lot of space. They have to move around a lot to find each other. But they don't really have like a home. They don't have a place where they can settle down, store their bikes, have supper every night. They move around all the time. Now, we know that pronghorn, before the current era, that there were many pronghorn around, and they actually did what we call a migration. Now, I think you've been learning about that this week, and you'll continue to learn about it if you follow World Wildlife Week. A migration is a movement that happens. It's you're moving in a particular direction, and you're doing it on a regular basis. It's kind of like going to school every day. You wake up, you put your clothes on, you have breakfast with your family, and then you go to school every day. And I don't know, how do people get to school here? Jesse, can you figure out how people get to school in this crowd?
If anyone wants to chime in the chat, you're more than welcome to. I know when I went to school, my grandmother drove me, which is really nice of her. She spent a lot of time doing that. My friend had a bike. My mom walked to school because it was right in her neighborhood. In our chat, we've got bus, walk, ride, a good mix for Mr. Hancock's class. Yep, so a mix of public transit, walking, and maybe riding on a bike, John.
I never thought about the public transit. I bet you there's some kids here like take the subway to school. That's pretty cool. Pronghorn didn't have that advantage. They had to walk everywhere that they went, and they migrated really long distances. So in the summer, they would walk from the south towards the north to go to where they could find sagebrush, because we learned that's their favorite food. So some of the migrations were super long, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers or hundreds of miles. Some were pretty short, getting around lakes and things like that. But all pronghorn moved north in the summer. And in the winter, when the snow fell, they would just go back. They would go back to where that they would spend their time in the winter in the south, where there's not so much snow, maybe a little bit more food for them. They were pretty happy to go south. I would love to go south every winter because I live in a pretty northern place. We get tons of snow. In fact, it snowed here this morning. It would be nice to be able to do that every year, but I'm not a pronghorn. Okay, now look at this. This is the Great Plains today. Now, we have done a pretty good job of chopping the Great Plains up. It's no longer this one massive blob of grassland that's available for pronghorn. We've done a lot of work to turn it into wheat fields and canola, putting highways through and railways, building pipelines and oil wells and cities and towns. And have I mentioned highways? All that stuff has done a real number on the Great Plains, on the prairies of North America. And so now there's actually less space for pronghorn to move to, and it's less easy. It's harder for them to get from one patch to the other, to the point where now in the summertime, their migrations are actually pretty short because they really can't move that far. And it's really hard for them to find a good patch of natural grassland for them to live on when they finish their migration. Now, this is not weird, but boy, pronghorn find this weird. I'm going to imagine we talked about going to school. Imagine if you went to school one morning and you walked or you took the bus or you took a bike or your parents gave you a lift. Imagine if in the middle of the day, of the school day, someone built a big wall or a fence between you and school. So you were trying to go home and you couldn't. Suddenly you're running into this wall. You either have to try to climb over the wall, doesn't really work, walk all the way around it. It would take hours to get around the wall. Maybe you can't get around it at all. This is exactly what's happened to pronghorn. In the middle of their migration route, we've done all this stuff to put barriers on their movement, to prevent them from getting from where they are to where they want to be, from their winter home to their summer home, and from their summer home back to their winter home. They find that super weird. And I, as a conservationist, also find that weird. So we're doing a lot of work to kind of help them out, to figure out how best to allow them to get back from their summer home to their winter home and vice versa. So this is a really good example. Now, this is in Wyoming. Jesse told me there's nobody here from Wyoming today, but Wyoming's a beautiful place. I've been there. It's spectacular. And there's lots of pronghorn there. So this is a highway down here. You can only see the one part of it. And they, in Wyoming, in this place called Trappers Point, which is near a place called Pinedale, they had built this overpass just for pronghorn. It's not for cars. And this is actually a herd of pronghorns, kind of hard to see, but all these animals here are all pronghorn. And they built this overpass over this highway specifically for pronghorn, because pronghorn really don't like highways. And we're studying them now in southern Alberta, and we have learned that they can spend days and weeks running up and down the side of the highway, afraid to pass because of all the traffic that is on them. So one of the things that a lot of people are doing to help is they're building these overpasses just for wildlife. And deer can use this, birds even use it, snakes use it, and pronghorn use it. And this helps pronghorn get from one patch of grass during their migration to another grass, sagebrush. That's what this stuff is down here. This is all the sagebrush that they're trying to get to. Another thing that you may not have thought about, and that's interesting about pronghorn, is that they don't like to jump. When they go and when they encounter a fence, they actually crawl under the fence. They almost never jump over it. Occasionally you'll see a picture of one jumping over, but almost all the time they crawl under a fence. Now look at this fence. It's got all these nasty barbs on the wire. Those are good for cattle, but what happens is when the pronghorn crawl under the fence, they scratch their backs and all the hair off their backs on the barbs and the barbed wire. It really hurts. And you can see this sometimes when you're looking at pronghorn. So some of the things that other people are doing is they're changing fences. Now look at this wire. This wire doesn't have any barbs on it. So we're changing cattle fences around the Great Plains to not only lift them a little bit higher to make it easier for the pronghorn to get under them, but also taking the barbs off of the lower strand of barbed wire so that the pronghorn don't scratch their backs up so much. So even though we've done a lot of damage to the Great Plains, making it a little bit less of a home for pronghorn, we're doing what we can to let pronghorn move around as much as they want to these days. Okay, that's kind of the end of what I want to talk about with pronghorn. I do have a few more things that I want to say because we're all scientists here. We're all curious. We're all interested in nature. I want to talk to you a little bit about what you can do. There's a lot of words in this slide. I'll read them off. Don't worry. What can you do to support wildlife in your own community? Well, first thing you can do is learn about the local species that are living in your neighborhood and the challenges that they face. You may not live where pronghorn live. That's okay. There's lots of animals around, even small animals, mice and birds and little insects and things like that that live in your neighborhood. Learn about them and some of the challenges that they might face in your life. There are apps on your phones. You might be too young to have phones, but on your parents' phones, iNaturalist is one, and you can get that in the United States and in Canada, where you can record the things that you see. And then scientists like me can use that information to really learn more, help the world learn more about nature. We call that citizen science, and you can contribute to that. You can also connect with clubs and conservation groups working on projects in your area. And I'm sure there's probably some in your school. There's probably like a nature club, or there's some type of local adventurers club where you can learn about nature by joining people who also love nature like you do. You can volunteer to help with things like cleanups or collecting data, or we get lots of volunteers in the Pronghorn Project to help change the fencing out on cattle fields. So we even use volunteers for that. And the most important thing you can do is share your knowledge. You've learned a lot today, so share what you have learned today and what you're learning this week with your friends and your family. And the more people know about how amazing and weird nature is, the more we'll be able to conserve it. And I have one more thing that I want to talk about, and that's mostly about you. Now, this is me when I was about your age. I was in elementary school, and we were taken out into the field, and we were asked to learn a little bit about nature. Here I am drawing some pictures on this sheet of the plants that I saw around me. Everybody thinks, not everybody, a lot of people think that science looks like this, that it's a bunch of folks in lab coats with, the Erlenmeyer flask full of bubbling chemicals, and that's what science is, and it's kind of boring and dry and you're inside all the time. But it's not always like that. You can be a scientist if you're curious and you want to explore the world and learn more about it, because that's what it is. You're the modern day explorer if you look for science. And boys and girls, I'm telling you, it's been a really rewarding time for me. I've spent a lot of time in nature in some pretty crazy, wild, and beautiful places. I spent a little bit of time in the lab, but it's not all about being in the lab to do science. You get to do a lot of really cool stuff in nature. And I want to end with a really cute pronghorn that came up to the camera and gave it a boop. All right, Jesse, I think I'm done.
John, that was spectacular, man. I think we need to borrow that weird sound for all our programs in the future. Very, very much for that. Before we dive into the Q&A, and I do want to note, if you've got extra questions that we don't get answered live in our 12 minutes or so together, please do email them to me. I'll get them to John, and we'll make sure we get lots of time for Q&A. But we are going to start with our Kahoot. So test some understanding, have some fun on some big things, take a drink after 30 minutes of talking. That's perfect. And for those who are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And again, what you win is John and I's everlasting respect. So no pressure at all. And John, if you want to help us out with any of these answers as we go along, we'd love to have your assistance. But we are going to get started with this ASAP. And the faster you answer, the more points you get. So let's do this thing and get underway. If you just want to yell the answers out in your classes too, that is totally cool. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Question 1, true or false? Grasslands support the largest groupings of wildlife on planet Earth. Now, this picture is not a Canadian grassland, but it might give away the game a little bit. You've been to East Africa and seen these. And I mean, it's a really special thing to witness something like this in the wild. Awesome. Oh, wow. You already got your answers in. We didn't even have to wait till the end of the thing. Almost all of them. Right. So like in North America, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, whenever we have grasslands, you have huge agglomerations of really, really big animals. I've been to Grasslands National Park in Canada, saw some really spectacular things there. So you guys are on the ball with this. 90+% success rate. All right. I don't think we covered this exactly, but I'm really curious what people think. Roughly what percentage of Canada's native grasslands are left? 95%, 50%, 0%, or 20%? These are not like wheat fields. These are native grasslands that have been there for ages. What is it percentage? I stole this from one of your blogs online, John.
Oh, really?
I did. Okay. Last year, and most people got this right. So this might have changed since you wrote this, but 20%, and then most of that 20% is in the management of ranchers and farmers, which is interesting in its own right. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And that 20% still, I mean, it's actually really hard to know. It's really hard to know, but that's what we figure it is. Only 20% left.
So a lot of room for improvement from there, and we're starting to see more and more farmers, ranchers, and whatnot getting involved in conservation on their lands and being involved in that on a broader scale. So that's been really nice to see over the last year. Personally, I think that's kind of cool. Red Raccoon has our lead. 2 more questions. All right. Grasslands National Park is in which province? We kept showing maps of where the pronghorn are. Is the national park in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or Nova Scotia? I've been.
I can give you a hint. I can give you a hint. Where I saw that pronghorn, I mentioned Mankota. It's really close to Grasslands National Park.
Ooh, there's your plug of the day for anyone who knows where that is. I've been to Grasslands. There were so many prairie dogs. And, a lot of you thought Manitoba. Saskatchewan is our correct answer. Head a little west of Manitoba. Wow, you're really throwing off the leaderboard here. All right. Red Raccoon keeps our lead. Final question. Pronghorn are so fast because of what? They used to have to escape from cheetahs. It's just more fun to go fast. They're trying to get out of the grasslands. They want forest. Or they've had too much sugar and have to burn off the calories. That's what I would drink pop. One of my favorite, you and I talked about this before we did the live program, but one of my favorite ways of thinking about the cheetah thing is that they're running away from ghosts. Like there are no longer cheetahs, but they still have to be that fast, which is such a poetic and beautiful way. And our audience killed it. You guys did great. All right. John with our Kahoot, and we're going to Mr. Hancock's class for our first question. YouTubers, you can share yours as well. Mystery Wombat is second, Bright Lobster third, and first for all the marbles, drum roll is Red Raccoon. Way to go, guys. If you are any of these folks, let us know who you are in the chat. But Georgetown, come on in and kick us off with our first question. Hey, guys.
Hey, that was a really engaging presentation. My class really enjoyed the sound effects, of course. A couple of students were wondering, what is the lifespan and how long do the horns get?
Ooh.
So a pronghorn, it's actually hard to know how long they live. Probably about 15 years, something like that. That's not unusual for a really old pronghorn to live. Sometimes, depending on whether or not they can actually get access to their favorite places to migrate to, they might live a shorter life. But 15 years is probably a pretty good guess. How long do the horns get? They'll get a really big one will get probably like 45 centimeters, almost like 1.5 feet, 2 feet long. Like they can get really, really long.
Huh. I wouldn't have guessed that, having seen pictures of yours. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love, by the way, that it was a little tricky to find the life expectancy. So we get this question all the time in all broadcasts. And it's really interesting that almost every time scientists aren't like, oh, it's 20 years. It's always, there's a little nuance. It's hard to know. And it's because tracking things in the wild and really following them for their full lifespan is really tricky.
It's really, really hard, yeah. And it's not like a tree. You can't cut them in half and count the rings. You don't really know how old they are.
There's an image. So cheetahs don't hunt them anymore because there's no more cheetahs. Is there anything that hunts them? One of our questions coming in online.
Yeah, so there's still coyotes on the plains, and they do hunt them. And because they are clever animals, they know how to get to pronghorn. And even though pronghorn can see almost all the way around them, cheetahs are pretty sneaky, or coyotes are pretty sneaky. There are wolves in places on the Great Plains. I know there's wolves in some places in Saskatchewan and Alberta still. They will hunt them. But actually the major predator of pronghorn these days is people. We still hunt them, and they get hit on highways and things like that, and that's kind of like being a predator. So, but yeah, they're still a hunted species in North America, and so probably I would say people are the biggest predator of pronghorn.
It's pretty much the biggest predator of everything, having done
these days.
Yeah. By the way, one of the great joys in this job is I have people from the east and west, all across Canada and the U.S., and the coyote divide is really pronounced when we talk about names.
I know. Big one.
You shared that overpass in Wyoming. Do we have overpasses like that in Canada any place?
We do have overpasses like that in Canada, not for pronghorn though. So there's a couple of them in Banff National Park, and they're meant for bears and elk to cross the Trans-Canada Highway. There's a new one being built on Highway 3 in the Crow's Nest Pass, also in Alberta, sort of Alberta-BC boundary in that area, and that's also meant for elk. There are none in the prairies though. And so I'm actually working on a group of people from the Alberta Conservation Association and the Mistaki Institute, and we're trying to see if there's a good spot to build one in southern Alberta and Saskatchewan, because pronghorn need our help crossing, particularly the Trans-Canada Highway.
Very, very cool. We've done actual whole programs on the Banff overpasses and underpasses before, and it's a really, really special thing. People from all over the world come to Banff to study their overpasses. So check that out, guys. All right, Mr. Hancock, we're heading back to you guys. Come on back in for another.
Hey, thanks for having us. One of my students wanted to know, are they cold-blooded, warm-blooded?
Ooh. Oh, they're warm-blooded, really warm-blooded. But actually, that's one of the really cool things about pronghorn is that, if you're warm-blooded, you're generating heat from your muscles, right? And pronghorn generate a lot of heat because they're running really fast. They can run long distances. And when you know what happens when you run like that, you get hot, right? Well, when you get hot like that, you have to sweat, and that helps you get rid of the heat, or you take off a shirt or something like that to cool down, or you have to stop running because you get too hot. Pronghorn actually can store that heat. And so they can get their body temperature up to way over 40 degrees Celsius, or I don't know what that is, like 102 or something like that degrees Fahrenheit. And they can store that heat so that they can run longer and faster, because they don't really sweat. They can pant, and they can't take a shirt off because, well, they don't wear shirts. So this is it's another really fun and weird thing about pronghorn.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's been a couple of things you've taught me today, which is really fascinating. Like, I love these sorts of animals, so I've learned quite a bit, and fascinating. Okay, inevitable question. What is the weirdest thing? Like, is there a thing that you think is the most weird of all the things you shared, or something you didn't share?
Honestly, it's the fact that they fight, the siblings, the brothers and sisters, Fred and Mary, they fight before they're born. Like that, I just find bizarre. I fought with my brothers. I told you about that. Don't tell my mom. Well, okay, tell my mom. She knows. But the fact that they're fighting even when they're still in their mother's womb, I find the weirdest thing. And they're the only really large mammal that does that we know of.
Yeah, so John taught me this before the broadcast began, and I've only ever heard of this with sharks. Like, that's the only creature that people think of when they think of that. So for it to be in the mammal group too is really, really neat.
Yeah.
Anyway, time flies and you're having fun. We're going to take one more question from our live class because they're here with us, which is great. And again, please do share extra questions in the chat. Email to me after the fact. But Mr. Hancock, if you want to wrap us up with one more before we say thank you and farewell, come on in.
Yeah, for sure. So the migrations have gotten shorter. One of the students wondered, have they gone different? Have they gone to other habitats now?
Ooh.
Yeah, Mr. Hancock, that's a great question. Really, you have some clever students, I have to say. Yeah, and we actually are studying that right now. There's been a little bit of research done in the past, but the group that I'm working with in southern Alberta, we put about 100 radio collars on pronghorn, and in order to find out where they're moving. And we do think that they are actually moving to different habitats, because a lot of their habitat where they used to go, where the migrations were, just no longer exists, or they can't get to it because of highways. So they are tending to spend a little bit more time in crop fields, and they're going to totally different places where we've never really seen them before. And then there's places where they were before, like for instance in Manitoba in southern Canada, used to be pronghorn all over the place, and now there's no pronghorn anymore. All the pronghorn just have no place to go there. So yeah, indeed, they are going to different places.
Yep, habitat loss. It's funny, all our classrooms all around the world, climate change is a thing that's really stuck with all our classrooms. Habitat loss is probably the biggest threat to wildlife. If you don't have home, if something blocks you from getting to your home, like we talked about in the broadcast, that can really, in the same way that it would be challenging for you to survive outdoors without a house over your head or a building or whatever else.
Whatever.
Long way. So great queries, guys. Before I sort of wrap up in a sec, I just want to note again, I really encourage our classes to check the Canadian Wildlife Federation website. Join us for the whole rest of the series. We've got 3 other broadcasts on hummingbirds, monarchs, and whales in the next 3 days. This program is going to be on our YouTube channel, and a special plug for Reverse the Red, too, if you want to hear about conservation initiatives worldwide. But before we say farewell, is there any last message you want to leave us with about pronghorn and grasslands? Anything before we say goodbye?
They're an incredible animal, and a lot of people really don't know about them. And so if you have a chance to go to the Great Plains, if you don't live there, or if you do live somewhere on the prairies, go jump in a car, go on the train, go and look for native grasslands to see if you can spot one. You can see them all over Western North America. They're around. They have an incredible history. They're incredibly cool and weird animals, and they love it when people learn more about them.
Yep. No better message than that, John. I hope we send off our kids to go explore local wildlife and wildlife around Canada and beyond. Yeah. I'm going to bring in Mr. Hancock's class to join me in saying thank you and farewell. So come on in, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.